Hello, everybody, and welcome to the season finale of Viewing Gods. I am your Viewing God, Dylan Blight. Thank you for joining me on the final episode of this after show for American Gods, the Starz Fremantle, Amazon Prime in Australia or in UK and stuff, I believe, as well. Series. This episode, we are going to be ranking season 2. I'm going to be telling you my least favorite to favorite episode of season 2, briefly going over them, why they're placed in those certain positions. We'll briefly go over as well my overall thoughts for season 2, and then as well jump into some season 3 stuff as well. But this is just a little bit of a wrap-up episode as we like to finish off all of our after shows here at the Exposure Network with these sorts of things. Now, usually all of our previous after show series have been done with 2+ people involved, and then we wait until the end of the episode, and then I, using the mathematical skills, work out what is the official Exposure Network list that deems, using what we all vote. But considering it's only me, the list I'm about to give you is the Exposure Network's official list of worst to best American Gods episodes from American Gods Season 2. So before we jump into the list, though, some quick thoughts on Season 2. We don't need to go much into it because we've talked a lot about it throughout the show. We've talked a lot about it briefly in last week's episode. We've talked a lot about how this season was a disappointment. And I feel like that's a fair thing to say. I don't feel like anyone can really argue with that. It was definitely a disappointment. It was nowhere near as strong as the first season. And it's not really to do with one particular thing. There's so many things you can pinpoint as being the reason the show struggled to be as entertaining and fun and a joy to watch that the first season was for a lot of people, myself included. But I think the number one culprit is just there was a lack of direction, full stop, for the tonal direction of this series, the overall writing. There was just no direction. It was just such a ship that you could feel that was lost and didn't really know where it was going. And there were certain things at all points in time throughout the series that I could point out and go, that was cool. That was interesting. That's a cool concept. I'm enjoying these characters. Whatever. There's enough that, of course, overall, I enjoyed watching it somewhat week by week, even though there were some episodes where I'm like, oh, this is a bit of a struggle. And at times you're like, oh, that's really bad writing. Or why did someone let that pass? Certain things like, oh, that's a major plot hole thing when it comes to me, like with that damn tree thing, which I've brought up several times. But it's just, overall, it's just such a lost ship this season. And we'll talk a little bit about season 3 at the end of this, but I'd say hopefully we can get back on track for season 3. If I had to rank and give season 2 a score overall, off the top of my head, I'd probably give it a 5.5 or a 6 or something around that, and that because there's only 2 episodes that I would say were really good to great, and then there was a bunch of mediocre episodes and then a bunch of meh episodes. So it didn't really have fine range, especially for a high quality series that has 8 episodes. You expect a lot higher bar of intrigue. Now, what makes the show worth watching and pushing through a lot of the bad writing and silly story decisions and stuff that's happening is they got great actors. The gods are interesting characters. The world is interesting. And all those things mixed together definitely makes pushing through the season and the show still interesting for me, and interesting enough that week by week it's still fun to watch, even though it is deeply flawed at this point. So let's get into ranking the episodes. The first, we're going 8 to 1. So it's my, to reiterate, least favorite to my favorite episode. My least favorite episode of the season was episode 3, Munin, whatever we call it. I never actually figured it out, hey. So I'm going to give you the IMDb synopsis for all these episodes in case you forgot what they were about. This one says, as he's tracked by Mr. World, Shadow makes his way to Cairo thanks to a ride from Sam Blackcrow. Mr. Wednesday slyly gains Laura's help in forging an alliance with powerful God. Yes, this was the stuff that worked for this episode was, for me personally, the Sam Blackrose stuff. Of course, Shadow makes his way to the highway, ends up in a car. We get to see him doing a little bit of his tricks in that gas station, and Sam's conversation with Shadows on the road, I liked and I enjoyed that aspect. Everything about Wednesday and Laura was nothing. Got nothing for me, really. There was a couple intriguing bits here and there, but overall, looking back on the season, I would say this episode just had majority, that was just big old poo for me. Especially the ending, where I was like, you get media fucked by media sticks and whatever else is going on. Putting it at number 8. I'm sorry. Number 7 on my list, we're going to have episode number 5, The Ways of the Dead. So the synopsis from IMDb for this episode reads, Shadow learns the ways of the dead with the help of Mr. Ibis and Mr. Nancy in New Orleans. Mad Sweeney introduces Laura to old friends who share their world of voodoo healing. Mr. Wednesday embarks on a road trip with Salim and the Jinn. So the stuff that works in this episode for me personally was, I guess, I didn't mind the Mad Sweeney Laura stuff. That was probably the most interesting stuff, but even then it wasn't highly intriguing. It was the okay aspect of the show. Mr. Ibis and Mr. Nancy's stuff with Shadow and the dead and the story of sorry, I can't remember the character's name, but that story of that person coming back and all this sort of stuff. And then I remember when talking about, if you go watch me review that episode, I'm talking about, was this all just talking about the way that Mr. Ibis and Mr. Nancy kind of get into setting up some sort of kerfuffle between two of them, even though they'd previously set up some sort of alliance with them. Nothing ever comes of any of this. This is another thing that's annoying about this season. There's lots of potential plot lines and potential character stories and stuff set up. None of it really pays off to anything, and it's really annoying reaching the end of the season knowing that a new showrunner is going to come in, and most of this stuff, if not all of it, is just going to be nothing. So because most of this, I believe, is big old nothingness, it's not very good. And the Wednesday stuff with Salim and the Jinn, no, that's a big old no on that one. So coming in at number 6, I've got the second episode of the series, The Beguiling Man. This IMDb synopsis for this episode reads, promising vengeance for the death of a beloved old god, Mr. Wednesday begins preparation for a great battle. Laura and Mad Sweeney chase Shadow's diminishing light after he disappears. So the coolest stuff with this episode is definitely once again, Laura and Mad Sweeney stuff. That's kind of a through line for a lot of this second season. And the major reason he definitely has to come back. Come on, bring him back. Third season. But that stuff with their road trip, their back and forth banter, the car breaking down, him taking her through the horde to fast travel somewhere, all that stuff is cool. Shadow getting like Mr. Town going at Shadow and asking him all these questions about Wednesday and stuff, not that great. The stuff that was cool about this episode was the flashbacky stuff with Shadow and his childhood and that sort of stuff. I enjoyed that stuff quite a lot, but that was such a small portion of a lot of the episode, I guess, being mixed together. And then the Mr. Wednesday stuff on the road trip to wherever they're going to park a car to then act like the car's going to get destroyed, but then the car's reborn next episode. And then Nancy comes on this journey and then just walks off to the home. I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff in this episode. It's coming at number 6. At number 5 on my list, I have the season finale, Moon Shadow, the episode we talked about last week, of course. As I said, and I'll stand by it, is that it's a perfectly okay, like mediocre episode if it had been episode 8 out of 10 or something along those lines. Like it would have been, it just feels like such a mediocre episode on the train ride towards the season finale. The fact that it's the season finale is what really brings it down quite a lot, because it's just such a fizzle pop nothing of a season finale. But the IMDb synopsis is, Shadow is tormented by recent events and Wednesday has disappeared. Those that remain witness the power of new media. She's unleashed and the nation is enveloped in a state of panic brought on by Mr. World. I enjoyed all their plan. You know, it's the most recent episode we've watched. I enjoyed everything about that factor. But yeah, as an episode and as a season finale, I can't get over it. It's so weird. number 4 on my list, I have episode 4, so that kind of ties in quite well. The greatest story ever told. I don't think the title works too well for what they kind of set up the potential of it, but the IMDb synopsis is: while Shadow and Mr. Wednesday take a secret meeting in St. Louis, Bilquis arrives at the funeral home in Cairo, where she engages in a debate with Mr. Nancy and Mr. Ibis. Laura rejoins Mad Sweeney. So pretty much all of this episode works for me, apart from a lot of, once again, it's like Shadow and Wednesday. My biggest problem is a lot of time of this fucking series. Shadow and Wednesday stuff in that diner, it's probably the least interesting stuff. All the stuff to do with money, it's just another god that shows up much like Jesus and goes, motherfuckers, money makes me more powerful than any is, and I don't have to join any side, and I can do whatever the hell I want. I'm off. Bye. Peace out. Have fun with your fight. But what we do get is the Bilquis arriving at the funeral home stuff in Cairo and having the back forth with Nancy and Ibis, and Nancy's speech in this episode, and then pointing out how Wednesday's probably just going to fuck them over and all this sort of stuff. That was the interesting. I still think it was a really great speech he gives and talks about, the black youth still just being like treated badly, and like how they're basically fucked from the moment they step foot in school and all these sorts. I can't remember the speech off the top of my head, obviously, but all that stuff was really interesting, and it was really performed quite well. And I thought they were setting up some like cool, the three of them getting together, but then it's like next episode, it's like, oh, we forget that even by the end of the series, forget anything that's really happened. But still, as an episode, stands by. It's really quite interesting. Laura rejoining Mad Sweeney, of course, is always good, because those two are probably the best part of the second season. Nope, let me take that back. They are the best part of the second season. So at number 3, I'm going to have the season premiere titled House on the Rock. So although it's so funny to look back on this episode, I feel very, very funny to look back on this episode. But the synopsis for it is: following the epic showdown at Easter's party, Mr. Wednesday continues his quest to pitch the case for war to the old gods. Mr. World plans revenge. Technical Boy goes on the hunt for new media. So this episode, when me and Nick was talking about it when we watched it for the first time, both of us were very, I feel like from memory, both of us were very much in the same vein, which was that it definitely didn't feel like season 1, but at the same time, it didn't feel not completely different. Like it still had some weird, like the way it was being shot, but then all the characters were together. It's interesting to look back on this episode, because it definitely feels like out of all the episodes from season 2, the premiere is the one that kind of is this transcending from what you may know in season 1 to what season 2 is now going to be. And looking back on it, it still has a lot of interesting things. The first time we get all the characters together, we go into the Wednesday's Mind Palace, is that what we're going to call it, or whatever that is, and we get to see all the old gods in their original forms and these conversations, and Bilquis joining the team, Technical Boy and Mr. World setting up this thing, going saving and setting up what they're going to do for the rest of the season, which is hide down in a bunker pretty much, with the Argus Eye and all these sorts of things and whatever it was called. And we set up all their plans. Like looking back on it, still pretty interesting episode, I feel. So then, as my second favorite episode for the season, I'm going to have episode 6, Donna, however you want to pronounce it, The Great. IMDb synopsis for which says: Shadow and Mr. Wednesday seek out Devlin to repair the gun gear spear. In a flashback, the story of Mr. Wednesday's son, Donna, is shown. So it's primarily the flashback episode of the season, and that's the reason that the episode is so good, is all this flashback stuff to see Donna, or Thor, whatever you want to call him, Wednesday's son, his story, what they're doing at the time, their relationship. We really get the gist of how Wednesday just fucks everything and ruins everyone's lives, and it's just this virus and a disease to pretty much everyone around him, including his own family. And then even the stuff where it comes back and we get the more comedic elements of the episode in the present day, with them trying to get the spear fixed, the scene where they do the whole heist thing to steal the jacket, that was quite funny and plays quite well. The scene where Shadow sits down Wednesday and like pretty much gets in his face and says, "You're going to tell me the truth," and Wednesday actually opens up a little bit and they have some actual conversations, because there's so much Wednesday bullshit and Shadow not just back forth nonsense conversations. This episode is really the only one where I feel between that scene in the mannequin room, plus even just him opening up a bit in the car ride later, is the only time you can really feel like those two are actually having a conversation that just isn't bullshit. So good episode. Definitely the second best of the season for sure, but that leaves only one episode left. And of course, it is the penultimate episode of the second season, which was episode 7, Treasure of the Sun. The IMDb synopsis of which reads, in Cairo, Mr. Wednesday entrusts Shadow with the Gungear Spear. Mad Sweeney recalls his journey through the ages as he awaits his promised battle. Once again, he warns Shadow about Wednesday. This episode was the most emotionally interesting one, and it's I think the reason it works the most is because Sweeney is the most interesting character on this fucking show. And even though I've read and heard so many people bring up the fact that he's not in the book very much, and he apparently dies way earlier than when he dies in this TV show, still haven't read the books. Believe it or not, in a week I haven't read the books. But even though he dies much earlier, the version they've got in the show is just so much more interesting. And he's my favorite character in the show, and I believe he's probably a lot of people's favorite characters in the show. And maybe the showrunners don't want him to be the favorite character in the show for a lot of people because they want you focused on other things. But too bad, you've kind of got this great character in Mad Sweeney, and they kill him off. And of course, I hope that they bring him back for season 3, and I hope that that's where Laura's taking him, and that's what I hope is happening. He's going to be brought back to life. Please, please, please let that happen. But even without all that, his final showdown in this episode, and his him slowly remembering stuff about his past and his origin story and these different versions of it, and then it being like, well, does it really matter? Like, a story's a story, and all these sorts of things that's happening. It's well shot, well acted. Pablo's fucking amazing in this episode, I feel. And then his final moment with Wednesday is just, as in the thumbnail right there, if you're watching the video version, just that one shot of him just like putting up the fingers, going down, taking the spear, just like giving Wednesday the last fuck you. Definitely favorite moment of season 2 for sure, and overall makes that Treasure of the Sun the best episode of season 2 for sure. To quickly go over some season 3 stuff before we end this show once and for all. We did kind of cover this in one of the episodes early in the series where they announced it. I can't remember what episode, episode 1 or 2, I think. But they did announce that Charles Chick Egley, I think is how you say his name, will be the executive producer and showrunner for season 3, unless they fire him between now and then and get someone else. Who knows what the fuck could happen? But he has been involved with like Dexter as a producer, Shield as a producer. He's directed like Walking Dead and stuff like that. Hemlock Grove, the Netflix series he was involved in. So he's worked with some dark undertone-y shows, I guess, which kind of works for this. How exactly or why he got picked, I think at this stage it's very much like whatever Neil wants someone who's going to stick closer to the books. We kind of know that, and I understand that to a point, but at another point it's like, don't let someone make something out of your property if you're not going to give them some just leeway to be creatively open to do different things, I guess. But either way, I worry too much about them just trying to get an EP and a showrunner in that's going to guide just a guidebook. Like, he's just, without any actually creative control or a vision for the show, because the show needs a vision. Season 1, you hate it or love it, and a lot of people hate it because of the tone and the slowness and the way it's shot and all these sorts of things, but it had a vision. Season 2 definitely has no fucking vision at all. They bring in a showrunner. I should have got his name. I've completely forgotten because it's probably, I'm sorry, but it's not even important. They bring in that person, Jason, was it? Okay. Bring in him, and then they sideline him apparently, like, because they weren't happy, and then it's like, who's even running this ship? And the answer was no one. The actors kind of were, I guess, and the people directing. It's like, there's no one really guiding this whole fucking show, and that's the way it ends up the way it is. They've still got season 3 posted in for a 2020 release. Whether or not that happens is yet to be seen. Apparently season 2 was supposed to be 10 episodes, ended up having cut 2 episodes, which may explain why the season finale just kind of feels like nothingness. Hopefully season 3 actually gets to 10 episodes. At this stage, I'm just going to chuck it out there. I enjoyed watching it week to week, somewhat, for the most part, primarily. But at times, it was a struggle, and I cannot see this show getting past into a 4th season. Whoever or whatever, if it's Charles Chick Egley or they fire him and get someone else, figure out this shit on this show, figure it all out, and I honestly just think the best course of action for this show is to wrap up in its third season. It's 3 seasons. One good one that a lot of people didn't like or did like. Second one that pretty much no one liked from what I can gather. Some people, I mean, I like it. It's fine. I enjoy it. It's got a lot of problems though, obviously, but I enjoyed watching it still. But season 3, just wrap up the story. Don't push it into a 4th, 5th, 6th, or whatever the hell you think's going to go. Understand there's a lot of story here and storylines you want to be doing, but you're setting up so many storylines in the second season that you're not going to pull through anyway. Just take what you've got, finish up the show, wrap it up. Don't risk it anymore. That's what I want to happen for season 3. Now, of course, we will be back whenever the show turns back here at the Explosion Network for hopefully the last season of Viewing Gods. Hopefully. I just think it's better if they end in one more season. But we will be back, and when that happens, we will do a preamillary, Jesus, episode of Viewing Gods where we'll go over the trailers and what we think is going to happen, and if there's any background mishaps like we did for this season, of course. So stay tuned for that one. Where you should stay tuned is, of course, subscribing to youtube.com/Explosion Network, where you can catch this show. All of our after shows. There's a Game of Thrones one on at the moment called South of King's Landing. Who knows what other after shows we'll do in the future for what shows. I've got heaps of ideas. It just comes out to time. Necessary. Things I want to talk about. Lots of things I want to talk about. If you want to hear us just talk about movies and TV shows and all that sort of thing, which I presume you like if you're watching this, you should check out our movie and TV podcast called What Do You Want to Watch, hosted by one Ashley Hobley. You can find that and many more things over at explosionnetwork.com. You can follow me, your viewing god, Dylan Blight, on Twitter at Vivaladil, Vivaladil, and you can follow Explosion Network on Twitter at Explosion Pod. That'll be it for this episode, this season finale of Viewing Gods. Thank you very much if you've been watching the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the season at least, even if you had some problems. Thank you for joining me one last time. Bye-bye. Swipe right and Billquist. Catch up on the latest TV, online media, and movie news, from the biggest comic book films to the biggest YouTube crazes to our local cinema scene, and then hear what we've been watching before asking the age-old question, what do you want to watch? Available on all podcast services every second Friday. Just search your podcast app for What Do You Want to Watch and subscribe for free now.